A bill meant to keep parents informed about serious charges against school workers is making its way through the state legislature. The Denver 7 Investigate series, Parents in the Dark, inspired the legislation that would require that districts notify parents when a school employee is facing criminal charges. Our investigation found multiple instances where serious cases, including sexual assault against students, were kept quiet for months. Now, this bill has passed out of committee and is before the full House right now. And joining us to talk about that and all things legislative is Marianne Goodland, the chief State House reporter for ColoradoPolitics.com, and Blair Miller of the DenverChannel.com. And both of you follow the legislature very closely. But let's start with PARA and what is happening with the PARA bill.
The pension plan for the Public Employees Retirement Association is underfunded by about $32 billion. The Senate put forward a bill that had a 3% hike in the employee contributions, hiking the age of retirement to 65, and changing how the pension itself is calculated for each employee. What the House Finance Committee did in the past week was to modify all of that. They took away the 3% addition and instead devoted $225 million in state dollars to cover that. They changed the calculation on what's known as the highest average salary from a rolling 5-year average instead of the 7-year average that the Senate wanted. And then they also put the retirement age back to 60.
So how is this sitting with people?
We're seeing a lot of wrangling between the Democrats and the Republicans in both chambers, and I think that, I think having all these teachers walking out talking about pension has sort of lit a flame under both sides, and I think pushed both of them towards an easier solution, but I think we're still seeing that there's a divide there between them.
So there's still work to do on this.
This is something that's going to head to a conference committee once it gets out of the House.
Okay, let's talk about the Civil Rights Commission. What is happening to that?
The House sent over to the Senate what's called a clean reauthorization bill that just says let's extend it for another 9 years. The Senate Judiciary Committee this week put 5 amendments onto the bill that all passed on party line votes. One would change the appointment structure. Currently, the governor has the authority to appoint all 7 members. The Senate amendment that was run by its Senate Republican sponsor actually makes it an 8-member commission with half of the appointees going to the governor and half going to legislative leaders. That raised some concerns about gridlock. You generally don't have even-numbered bodies. We certainly don't do it with the legislature. The other major change was to allow complainants and respondents to make a decision about whether to go to district court to have their issues resolved instead of having the commission deal with it. And the whole point of having the commission was to sort of bypass the cost of going to court.
And why is the commission even being debated right now? It seems like it in the past has been a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think part of it definitely has to do with the fact that we're still in the middle of this Masterpiece Cake Shop thing, and if they're going to try and get this done by the end of the session, it's probably going to be before the Supreme Court decision comes out. And so I think that pressure is just kind of mounting on both sides. The Democrat thinks it's a no-brainer, but the Republicans, we've seen battling this for a while now.
Well over a year. There are some lawmakers who, before the session even started, said we're going to make sure that people of sincerely held religious beliefs aren't discriminated against, which is what they claim happened to Jack Phillips in the Masterpiece Cake Shop. Democrats on the other side point out that people of color have been discriminated against, and people with disabilities and other protected classes. Religious faith is not a protected class under our state anti-discrimination law.
Interesting. Okay, so we will be hearing more about this. All right, I think one of the big issues that made news this week, renaming I-25 Barack Obama Highway, and that took a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, I think, well, I know when we wrote the story that the just backlash, or I don't know, I guess good, or some people were definitely for it, but there was a lot more people who were more vocal about being out of it.
Absolutely, one side or the other.
It's kind of an interesting question in an election year here that we were talking about before this, that you have a guy here who's not going to be in this position next year, and he's running a bill in an election year where Democrats are trying to retake the Senate.
The Stamp of Bones bill, right?
So yeah, and then you have Ronald Reagan Highway down in Colorado Springs, you have Gerald Ford out in Eagle County. And those were all passed with support from everyone generally. So.
But they were also bills that were run in non-election years. The Ronald Reagan bill, which took the Douglas County section of I-25, that was 2001. The Gerald Ford was in 2007. And doing this bill in an election year seems to be about more than just renaming Central, the portion of I-25 that runs through Denver, as.
So what do you think will happen
Obama.
with this bill?
We already saw one Republican in the Transportation Committee in the House vote against it. It'll be interesting because President Obama has been the punching bag for Republicans in the legislature the entire 8 years that he was in office. If the question is whether they can put aside their partisan concerns about his record and honor him by renaming the highway.
I mean, you saw 5 Republicans vote for him in that committee, but it's the House where it's definitely going to get through. I think the Senate's going to be the real.
The Senate will be the big question.
Well, we'll follow up with you too on that as well. Okay, let's talk about big news: teacher walkouts, student walkouts. Do you think everyone sitting under that dome is hearing what teachers are saying and what students are saying?
You couldn't miss it on Monday. The noise level in the Capitol was pretty amazing. Teachers were there to support changes to the para bill, but they're also there to support changes to school finance. And the school finance bill went through the legislature this week, or went through the House, and passed out on Friday. So you have teachers really concerned about just where the dollars are going and whether there's going to be enough to avoid some of the things that we're hearing, things like cutting school weeks to 4 days a week, as Brighton is planning to do. Teacher layoffs, we're still hearing that that's a possibility in some school districts.
But students, are they hearing what students are saying? I mean, those are the people who are going to be voting.
I mean, I think that, I think they're all hearing them. Whether or not that's, going to amount to any action, especially this session, is another thing. I think as far as teachers go, Democrats have been really vocal in the education stuff. I think especially since these protests have started across the country. But yeah, I think that, as far as an effect this session, especially what the students are doing as far as gun violence, I don't think anything's going to happen.
Okay, so the legislature is supposed to finish by May 9th. We have how many bills to get through, Marianne?
As of last week, 328, which was actually 42 new bills that were introduced in the last week. The number actually went up instead of down. It seems to me that they are just they're having so much fun.
Guess who's not getting any sleep for the next, 2 weeks or so.
Lawmakers and reporters and lobbyists.
Definitely. Thank you both for your insight as always. By the way, if you ever have a question or a segment idea, you can tweet us at Denver 7 Politics. And don't forget, you can watch today's segments anytime at thedenverchannel.com/politicsunplugged. And before we